And that's when I really pay attention, because every time a founding team comes to me in crisis and says, oh, we thought everything was going great, but everything blew up, it's not because their product didn't work. Good founders know how to fix products. It's not because the market wasn't there either. Good founders know how to pivot and find good markets. But being in this really intense experience with your friends or roommates or romantic partners or whoever you're going to found a company with, that's a really unpredictable human journey. And that's where, and the research shows that that's where most of these problems happen. And when you think about team dynamics, the other part of the Wasserman framework here is what he calls the 3 Rs. Academics love neat little boxes and frameworks, by the way. You know, there are 3 of them and they all begin with R. So this makes this a little convenient. But understanding the relationships between the founders. Who are these people and how do they know each other and how do they get to like each other or trust each other? What are their roles? Who's in charge? Sometimes you hear founding teams where they say, well, we're going to split everything 50-50 and we're both co-CEOs. And a lot of investors or other outside partners will be very suspicious of that and saying, this is a founding team that hasn't yet had the hard conversation, because ultimately someone's got to be at the helm. And if you're always having to ask your co-founder, what do you think, and splitting the decisions, that can be a formula for indecisiveness. And then the rewards. Who's got what percent of the company? Who's getting paid what salary? Who's got the fancier office? However you want to measure how people draw rewards from what they do. Interestingly, in terms of relationships, this was a study that showed the stability of founding teams. They interviewed 379 companies, and the blue line up top is how many of the teams were still intact after 100 months. So obviously 100% were intact on day one. The red line shows that some amount of trail off happens. So typically after 100 months, most teams of say 4 people only have 1 founder left in them. And one of those lines represents teams that were friends before they started, and one of them represents people who didn't really know or like each other when they started. And I think you can guess where this is going, because I wouldn't be showing this as an interesting slide if it didn't show a counterintuitive answer. That the people that had the better stability in the teams that were more likely to stick together were not friends. And they go on to explain in the people they interviewed, often people who like each other a lot, especially romantic partners, they are kind of afraid to argue with each other on some level. Now, some good friends or romantic partners really know how to fight and duke things out, but often you're too polite with somebody whose feelings you care about too much. And people who don't have that emotional baggage from a prior relationship are more willing to slug out difficult issues. Really subtle aspect of human psychology that again, I don't know how true it is in every startup, but it's interesting to see this statistic. Again, there are hundreds of these studies in Wasserman's work and many other. The other is the so-called rich versus king phenomenon. And by the way, Wasserman notes the possibly offensive gender language. You could call this king or queen. But for shorthand, he wants to call it king. Basically, rich meaning, do you want to make a lot of money? Or king, do you want to be the boss? And most people will say both. But it's not so easy. And I'll give you, this being MIT, I have to start with a math quiz. And this will be on the final, by the way. So would you rather have 100% of 5 million or 5% of 100 million? And reaction to that, and thought that one might be better than the other. Why is that? They're worth the same thing. And the reason I showed you this little exercise is that if you ask a startup founder whether they'd rather have 100% of a company worth 5 million or 5% of a company worth 100 million, most startup founders will say they'd rather have 5% of a company worth 100 million. And that's the right answer according to the Wasserman research. That's the rich version, not the king version. The kings would rather have 100%, even if it's smaller, because they want to be in charge. I got my own islands here. It's a tiny island, but it's mine and no one's telling me what to do. Versus I'm going to spread the wealth with a whole bunch of partners and stakeholders and investors. And with them, I'll grow this thing much bigger. Yeah, I'll have to give away a lot of the company, but my piece of it I'll be on a much bigger piece of land. I won't be on a tiny little island, and it's worth it. Yeah, this is basically a summary of that. And you kind of face these dilemmas at various different points. When you're first making the decision to create a company, when you're bringing on co-founders and deciding what they're like, when you're hiring new members of the team, when you're bringing on new investors and other partners, and when you're thinking of winding down or selling or otherwise exiting from the company. So you go through this loop of analysis of what do people want and what makes them tick many times. Just another fun little snippet of research from this. What drives people to start companies or do what they do? And I don't know exactly what psychology tests they used to come up with these answers or if these were self-reported. But it's interesting that they chose to publish this research. This was actually 27,000 people they interviewed. And it's a little controversial to do binary gender-based men do this, women do that research, but this is published in the book, so I thought I would share it, which is interestingly that when you ask the entrepreneurs in the group, why are you doing this? Both men and women talk about power and influence and autonomy as being key reasons, which is kind of ironic because I think when you start a company, you all of a sudden have thousands of bosses, like everybody who your company touches. If I go to work as a cashier in a Walmart and I've got this irritable boss, I go home at 5 o'clock and I don't think about the Walmart till the next morning. I got one boss and maybe they're a pain in the neck. If I'm running a company, every single person in my orbit is my boss. So the illusion of autonomy is kind of interesting. Again, more just fun little tidbits, mostly just to get you thinking rather than to provide you with any answers. So in order to provide you with answers, I mentioned that I've got some live human specimens right here. And guys, I don't know if you noticed that I wrote your names on the blackboard so people can figure out who you are while you're speaking. And so if you want to come up and get ready to tell your stories, Zoe and Nabil are going to go first. And I do have your slides preloaded. If you just want to click the right-hand side of this, and you can tell your stories for a little while, and then we'll have some Q&A. And I've also been advised by our AAV guy that if you want to either pull this loose or just yank it toward whoever's talking, that will be better for some of the people who are on Zoom. So here is Tau Clinical. Fresh back from Rome, by the way, which maybe they'll tell you about in a minute.
We are, yeah. I'll start off with a really controversial statement. New York pizza is better than Italian pizza. I'm just gonna say it. But yeah, so we're at Tau Clinical. We're the two of us plus our third co-founder David, who is not right here. And yeah, so what we do is that we do standardization and error checking for clinical trials. Actually, you know what? I'll start with the problem statement. You're okay. So actually, do you want to do this? You're really good at this.
Okay, so many of you may know there's been a recent boom in drug discovery over the past few years, especially with the rise of AI. But unfortunately, that is unlikely to translate into a similar boom in treatments in the hands of actual patients. And the reason for this is that there's a huge bottleneck, which is clinical trials. So clinical trials are super slow and expensive right now. It's an antiquated process. They take on average 7 years, and it takes an average of like $2.5 billion to get a successful drug to market. So we're trying to alleviate this bottleneck and get all of these treatments out of labs and into the hands of the people that need them. And the way we do that is, like Zoe said, we have developed a way to automatically convert any clinical trial data into the same standard format, which then allows us to have a single source of truth so that we can catch all mistakes in this data.
Yeah, we can show the demo as well a little bit. It won't be super comprehensible, but maybe as an MIT student, you can be like, oh, this is the cool like data stuff I can give to my customers, and they'll be like, this is the awesomest thing ever. So we can go to that
Sure,
demo.
run the movie. Do you want to tell them what they're about to see?
Yeah, okay. So this is like something that a statistician or like a manager in a clinical trial would see when they see like all of their data. They see all of They see all of the patients listed. They see all of the errors that might show up, and then if anything like fishy shows up, they can be like, oh, we can catch this. This is like, this could save something like catastrophic in our clinical trial. So then like we can just go back and collect it instead of just having like years and years of work wasted. So we can, yeah.
And there's no audio in this, right? I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
hear a
So
word.
this is just like the researcher putting in their study data, and then it goes into here, and so it sees like just all of the like, yeah, like different types of, okay, yeah, let's go kind of fast, but but yeah, so there's like, they can see like all the potential errors and how that they can correct it. So yeah, I feel like it's very like data, very like spreadsheet, but yeah, if you make something like this, and then some data people really like it, then they'll I don't know, they'll pay you the big bucks and they'll be super happy. I don't know.
And why were you in Rome?
Oh yeah, so we were in the prod program, which such a fun, such a great program. It's like it's run by Harvard and MIT students. It started a few years ago, and it's all like startup founders. So everyone's just like working on their company together, and so we were all like just in Rome together and just like having a great time. Would recommend.
And you want to tell them what you're doing this summer too?
Oh yeah, we'll be in Y Combinator. If anyone knows, we'll be headed to SF, so we're quite excited.
And you came up with this idea as students, or had you graduated already?
At the time, no, but now we're graduated, yeah. Or no, Nabil's not actually, but he has one semester.
So you were hatching it before you graduated, and Nabil's got one more semester.
Yeah, yeah. It's been about a year now. Yeah.
So what's that transition been like from student to startup founder?
Yeah, so yeah, it's weird now because now I'm like, oh man, I'm graduated. Like I'm not on the Massey meal plan anymore, and I can cook now. But but yeah, we started it about a year ago actually. So that would have been like during another IAP, last year's IAP. We were on the fifth floor of the stud, in one of those like whiteboard rooms. And we were just like working on this stuff like every day, like figuring out how we could like change, like we were pretty set at that point that we wanted to do clinical trials. Like both me and our other co-founder David had experience in that at that point. And so we were like, okay, like how do we make like a really like awesome change in clinical trials pretty much.
Cool. Let's get a quick overview from our stall guardian friends. And if you just hit the right arrow on that thing, that will advance your slides. And then we'll have some open discussion and Q&A.
Cool. So thanks, everyone. Yeah, I'm Jadel, and I'm here with Nick. And we'll kind of tell you a little bit about kind of our journey, and then we'll get into what Star Guardian does. So yeah, I'm Jadel. I'm originally from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I went to Stanford for undergrad and then did grad school here at MIT with a concentration in computer vision and robotics. So, I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. It's kind of started in high school. I have a twin brother, and me and him would build our own video games. So we were just, at home, just writing up code and trying to make things to play with. And then as I grown through undergrad, I just tried to go to as many events as possible. So I would see, startups coming to campus. I would go listen to the talk. I would go visit as many as I can throughout the Bay Area. And it just got this hunger to learn and grow and really solve real problems. And so what happened is during my junior year, I created this career advice app. Basically, the problem statement is, if you don't have anyone in your network that is in industry, for example, so let's say I'm an undergrad, I want to study economics and maybe go into investment banking. I can go on a company's website, but it's pretty vague. I don't know exactly what an investment banker does at X, Y, and Z company. So what if you had an app where you could kind of put what you like and then vote on it, and then you could get industry input so people could add comments and whatnot. So pretty much like a quick app to gain rapid feedback on different ideas and different industries that you're interested in moving into. So I built this product out, very simple. And then no one can test it. So now I was like, oh, maybe there needs to be a gig economy for beta testing, a platform where you can pay people to test your app. Fast forward a little bit, we get into a few Stanford accelerators, and we realize the problem isn't in the testers, it's actually analyzing the feedback. So that helps me co-found my first startup, which was Kazarme, which was natural language processing that analyzed user research interviews. So it was kind of an early version of ChatGPT. What we would do is we would take user research interviews, summarize them for you, and give you recommendations on what products to build. And so that's kind of when the wheels started turning and we were building this out for a while. And one thing most of you probably know is like 99% of startups fail. So unfortunately, that one didn't work out. Came to MIT for grad school, but then started talking with Nick, and then we came up with new ideas, and we just kept growing from there. And I think a little bit about my MIT experience. I took Sandbox is great for just learning and iterating. They give you some free money to build out ideas. And then I took 2.739, which is product design and development. That helped me build out this new like robotics idea. So that robot right there was for content creators. So the whole idea is that if you're using like TikTok, Instagram, things like that, if you can't afford a professional cameraman, a lot of them just use a tripod to record the video. So what if you had a dynamic robot that would move and now it can do the camera recording and you can focus on your dance and things like that. So one thing you'll see from me is I always just tried a bunch of different ideas and just kept building in different areas and just seeing what problems can I solve and who can I help. And now I'll pass it on to Nick to tell a little bit about himself.
Hey everyone, very happy to be here this evening. So I'm Nick, originally from Montreal in Canada. I did my undergrad at Princeton. I studied I studied stats and computer science. At MIT, I'm a PhD student right now in my final year, focusing in operations research, doing optimization, statistics, and machine learning research. So yeah, a bit about my background and kind of like what led me here. Growing up, I was always very kind of technically oriented. I was the type of kid to grow up, competing in math contests, chess contests, robotics competitions, etc. I was really only first exposed to entrepreneurship, however, when I got to undergrad. The entrepreneurship community at my undergrad was one where there was a strong focus on future founder-oriented activities for people that might not have had that type of preparation from high school. So I really was able to immerse myself in that community, make a lot of great friends, and start kind of like turning the wheels in my mind. And then kind of broadly, I've always been one who has kind of strived to get my hands dirty whenever possible. So when I got to MIT, as part of like one of the machine learning classes I did early in my PhD years, I spun out one of my final projects as like an automated trading algorithm. I've also spent lots of time working in the Web3 space. So I previously ran a fund backed by General Catalyst, and also helped found an organization called the Black Wealth Club, which is a nonprofit based in Canada focused on helping early career Black Canadian professionals build skills useful for leadership development, wealth creation, and reinvestment in the community. Yes, that's a bit about my own background. I guess now we'll switch gears a bit to tell you more about what we've been working on. Yeah.
So it's pretty funny because I gave a talk in one of Ken's classes at the beginning of the fall, and we've completely pivoted the idea since then. So this idea was Realytics. It was computer vision for product placement in retail. So what you'll notice is that a lot of retail stores have analytics of customers that walk into a store and buy something, but they don't have a lot of data on the customer that didn't buy anything or someone that just window shopped or walked in. So what if you set up cameras inside of stores and you could track people? What did you look at? What did you try on? What did you touch throughout the store? Collect heat maps of that data, and now you can sell that back to the store and help them rearrange. So you can say, hey, how about we move pants from aisle 10 to aisle 15? And so gave new granular analysis of how to rearrange your shops. So we started building this out for almost a year, and then the whole market changed. Many of you might have seen early in the fall, Target started closing a bunch of stores. Even here in Boston, there's glass now everywhere in a lot of retail stores, and theft became the #1 concern of all of these stores. So we weren't really interested in theft management, so we decided to pivot. And luckily at the time, one of the stores that we interviewed reached back out to us and said, hey, my store doesn't get a lot of traffic, but I have a barn, and maybe your technology could be used for animal monitoring. So that's what pivoted us to our new idea, which I'll let Nick talk about.
So after this kind of pivot, we ended up realizing that there was this very important problem that exists in the horse health monitoring space. So in particular, there's a condition called colic that is the #1 killer of horses. And it's a health condition that a horse can kind of just develop spontaneously overnight. If detected early, the required treatment can be delivered and the horse can be saved. However, if the early signs go undetected for several hours, the horse can die. And horses are very valuable. They can be anywhere from worth $50,000 to several millions if you're dealing with a racehorse, for example. So what we realized is that we could kind of leverage a similar type of technology that we had been developing for the retail use case to actually automate this type of monitoring of horses. So we set up cameras in horse stalls. We're able to kind of 24/7 monitor the horse's condition, look for these types of behavioral cues that indicate an increased susceptibility of this condition. And when we detect anomalies, push warnings to the barn owner, the horse owner, or the vet, et cetera. So yeah, that's a bit about the current idea.
Cool. That's a serious pivot too. And that it was the serendipity of having a store owner say, well, I'm not getting enough traffic in my store, but can you do something in my barn? Why did you even listen to them? Why didn't you think, why do I want to go to a barn? You took them seriously.
Yeah, that's a great point. It by no means was an easy decision, and the decision to pivot was something that we struggled with over several months. And effectively, I think the main things that ultimately led us to pivoting was that we realized that after we continued conducting several customer interviews on the retail idea, we kept hearing a need that was consistently different from the need that we were initially focused on. And conversely, after we decided to kind of take the leap, visit this individual's barn, kind of look through his physical space, and then also spend time talking with, say, 5 to 10 other barn owners, we noticed that there was a very clear, consistent story coming from all of these other horse owners. And I think that the fact that the messaging was so clear and consistent was the main thing that really ended up pushing us to make that pivot. You're always told, listen to your customer, build for what the customer needs. I think the need was very clear in this industry.
Nice. And I forgot to ask you two, but I'll ask you two. How did you meet each other and decide you wanted to start a company together? And I'll ask you guys that next.
Yeah, so I was in the mechanical engineering department. Nick was in operations research, but we met actually at a crypto event. So, MIT is there's a lot of events in different areas, and there was one in cryptocurrency for this coin called Solana, as some of you might know of. And so there was the Solana Foundation was here in Boston, and Nick put a message out through like these MIT chats. Hey, is anyone interested in going? I'm going to this event. So I decided to go, and we kind of bond over our experience, kind of trading experience and building in the crypto space. And we both had a few ideas there that didn't end up working out. And that's kind of where we started talking from there. And then I was like, hey, do you want to try this idea that I did at Stanford called the 10 idea brainstorm? Basically, for 10 weeks, you think of 10 problems a week. So not a solution, but problems. So every single week, think of 10 different problems that you have and write them down and really focus on the problem. So we started doing that. We generated 100 ideas, and then we started iterating, hey, which ones can we solve? Which ones are we passionate about? Just started doing this on the side. And then we finally came up with the retail idea, and the rest is history.
And how did you guys meet?
Yeah, so we lived on the same hall for a few years, and actually, fun fact, the number of class group projects that I have done with Nabil over the course of my time at MIT, the total number is 6. So actually every group project I've ever done at MIT has been with Nabil. I don't think I would actually be capable of doing it without, he does like all the work. No, it's like, but yeah, if you like life hack, if you have like someone in your major, just I don't know, like just make them do all the work in all of your class projects.
And you have a third founder, right, who couldn't be here tonight.
Yeah. And then I met David when we were both working on like Banana Lounge, and so that was a ton of fun too. We also had a philosophy class together called Metaphysics, which is a very strange class. It's like I don't remember a single thing in that class besides like me and David just like constantly like debating with the teacher about like metaphysics, whatever philosophy topic of the day. But yeah.
So I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience in a minute. I came up with a few discussion topics, and I asked you about the origin of your founding team. But since the theme I talked about earlier, and folks can think about more specific questions they might want to ask along these lines or any other questions. if you had to define the culture or the vibe of your company, and maybe I'll start with you guys, like, what do you guys like as people? What's it like to work together? We all have a sense of what a business feels like. Like walking into some restaurants gives you a different feel than another, or a different store. Like if you were going to expand and have thousands of people working for you one day, how would they describe working at your company? How do you think about what's the feel of your company?
I don't know. So they say like they say that you're supposed to build a cult, which is like which is kind of funny in and of itself. But I guess it's like you want to start obviously like with that core of people that's like just really really like devoted to the mission, which is like I feel like all three of us have like it's interesting because I feel like we all have our own like unique vision, but like or unique like reason why we're really devoted to it. But like each of us like really really believes that there's like ways that we can like make treatments get to people faster and like personal reasons like why that's really important to us. And so like I would say if like we were to bring like anyone on else onto our like cult, I like we would want them to share in that or like want to share in that, I would say.
And do you two explicitly talk about that? Like, what's your culture? What's your ethical code? What's your credo? Like, how do you work together? Or do you just kind of naturally click?
Yeah, I guess there's definitely ways in which we like we try to like I guess like work together and stuff like that. I don't know if we've explicitly talked about like our culture, but like we definitely have one. I'm just not sure like like yeah, I guess it'd be cool if we like one day we were like our culture is like Star Wars and we all like love Star Wars and we do things like Star Wars, but I guess right now it's like exactly like naming that is like up in the air, I guess.
Mhm. How about you guys?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'd say for us, our culture is definitely collaborative and open-minded. We do a lot of brainstorming sessions, and the individual who owned the retail store that told us the kind of the barn idea, he's our third co-founder now, and he has the same energy. He's always excited to try things out. We're always writing things down, brainstorming sessions. So yeah, I'd say an open-minded and collaborative culture is what we have.
Did you say the guy who owned the retail store who told you to focus on Barnes is now a co-founder? He's part of the company. So
Yeah.
he made a serious pivot as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
What was that like? So it was just you two, and then you brought in the third founder
Yep.
when you did the pivot? Were you unanimous in that?
I mean, I think that whenever you're bringing someone else on, right, it takes some discussion and just really to your point of culture and getting a feel for the person. And we both agreed that he aligns with our values and our beliefs and where we want to go with this business and how we view technology. And it was a good match.
Nice. And one of the questions up there as well is when and how do you either agree on things or argue over things when there's a difficult decision to make or a controversial decision? Do you have a method you use, or do you roll dice or play rock, paper, scissors?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we have a kind of, let's say, well-defined procedure that we follow to the T. One of the values that we both agreed upon when we initially kind of had one of our early brainstorming sessions focused on the topic of culture was this idea of transparency and integrity. So as soon as like there is a kind of consideration, often difficult to make, we'll immediately hit the group chat and be very transparent and communicate that very clearly to the other people on the founding team. I on the kind of point of open-mindedness that Kanjadel alluded to, we also kind of when these kind of critical moments come up are very deliberate in having our brainstorming sessions that kind of are helpful in ensuring that we fully explore all alternatives before making a decision. So that's kind of roughly the at a high level the process that we've taken to make whatever difficult decisions come up or whatever difficult decisions that have had come up when they did come up.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess something about our culture that I can say is that we disagree all the time. We have plenty of like arguments, productive arguments. But yeah, anytime there's some sort of disagreement or something like that, we really try to get at what's behind it and just like hash it out on the spot. We don't want anything just like festering over time because obviously like co-founder dynamics are the main like killer of startups. And so we try not to let anything like anything go beyond the moment. And we also use this method that's promoted by Prod. It's called Crazy Club. And basically, each person is assigned kind of like a for or against of like a given idea or something that we're debating. And then you have to try to make the strongest case you can for that. And like, even if you don't agree with it, it really helps bring out the truth, have everyone see like the best sides of both sides. So that's been really helpful for us.
Yeah, I've read some articles on corporate culture, and a lot of people use the fight but then commit and move forward framework. That they want you to be at each other's throats, arguing with each other up until the point when you make a decision, and then have a very clear moment where you say, okay, we're done arguing, we've made the decision. And if it didn't go your way, you have to figure out how to wrap your head around the fact that you didn't get your way and commit and agree to serve what the co-founder, whoever got their way. That the company has to come together at that point. You can't have people walking around holding grudges thinking, no, they should have done it my way. They're all losers now. That you have to get on board with whatever the consensus is.
For sure. Yeah. Just one quick thing to add. We used to just have like 2 out of 3 to make any decision or I guess like consensus. But now we've implemented like each person has their own things for which they are like the final decision maker. And so it makes it like much less ambiguous, just like trying to figure out things.
And in terms of figuring out like titles and roles and who's the CEO and who's the VP of this and who's getting how much equity in the company, how have you solved issues like that?
Yeah, we've had many discussions, many hours, just trying to I guess like figure out what was the best structure for us. So yeah, for each of these things, just like sitting down, hashing it out, sleeping on it, coming back, talking more, really just listening to each other. And we've come up with a structure that like really fits well for us.
How about you guys?
Yeah, I'd say similarly, we just had, open discussions about what's everybody contributing, what's our goals. And I think it's too early to put, a title on each role, but, we're all co-founders right now and we're all building as long as we're all allocating effort. I think it's, time is another aspect as well. How much time can you put into the project, right? And then, once things take off, are people ready to kind of jump all in and go from there? So yeah, I think it just goes back to that transparency and open-mindedness.
And things like fancy titles or who gets how much equity in the company, those are some of the most difficult conversations I've ever tried to coach people through. And I don't really have good answers. I mean, a lot of times someone who was like the star performer in the lab and did all the work to invent something thinks, well, this is my baby, this is my invention. I'm going to own like a significant chunk of this, and I'll bring on a couple of friends to kind of be my assistants. So I'll get 80% and I'll give my 2 friends each 10%, or they make up something like that. And it turns out one of the 2 friends is the one who really knows how to run the company. And the original founder, the thing that they founded turns out not to work that great anyhow. And the person who was stuck with the 10% is really doing all the heavy lifting for the company. It's almost impossible to predict that stuff in advance. And who's bringing what to the table on day one, and what is that worth? And how do you figure out how to value it and not have any hard feelings amongst the other people on the team? And the flip side of that being, it can be a sign of wishy-washiness if you just say, well, we're all friends and we'll all divide everything equally. Because companies never really run like that. Usually, especially in where there's a serious founding invention, there's somebody who's really the protagonist of that journey, who really should be in charge of the company. And we've seen case studies of all kinds of interesting partnerships. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak being the most famous one that's been debated a lot. A lot of people think Wozniak got the short end of the stick and he really did all of the core technical work, but that none of it would have gotten into anyone's hands if it weren't for Steve Jobs' pizzazz. And it's not as simple as that. And I don't like to use Apple stories all the time because it's kind of a cliche. And it's very rare that you find 2 young tech founders like that who make it to the finish line and really grow a very large, successful company. Often there are lots of pivots and shutdowns and reboots. You were talking about how most companies fail, and that if you can fail gracefully and pull yourself back together and start something else, That's often the better way through. I also noticed, by the way, that, and I didn't think about this when I invited you guys, there's an interesting overlap of what you two are doing. I actually know another entrepreneur here who's working for motion monitoring to help pharma companies figuring out patient health. And this isn't for clinical trials, this is for post-market assessment, that you put these motion sensors in someone's apartment and they have to opt in and agree to do this. And you can like analyze their gait or how quickly they stand up or when they get out of bed. And you can tell if the medicine's working or if it's producing side effects. So there might be a mashup between your two companies here. And when you guys thought about pivoting to horses, did anyone say, why not monitor humans, old people or babies or other people who need care?
Yeah, so absolutely, that was certainly something that we spent some time thinking about. It felt like a natural abstraction or step up from the kind of retail use case. In the retail problem, we were already doing monitoring of humans. However, naturally, as soon as you're collecting any sort of information about a human, there are a lot of privacy regulations that you have to abide by. A lot of which aren't present for the case of horses and other animals. So that was a big consideration that we made, and we ended up kind of deciding let's focus on kind of horses for now, and then we can potentially expand to other animals, and then who knows what can come next.
Wonder if there's a market for over anxious pet owners. So if you leave your dog alone, you can get a little alert on your phone. Your dog is freaking out, or your dog is calm and having a good time. You're nodding as though you've thought of that.
Yes, that's also one of the areas that we spent time thinking about, and yeah, is on the roadmap for the future.
So back to clinical trials, and as you say, this is a multi-billion-dollar adventure for any drug company that wants to bring a drug to market. It's incredibly complex and expensive to run these clinical trials and to track the data about it. But that also means that this is a well-traveled path. I don't know if you've heard the jargon, red ocean, blue ocean strategy. There's actually a book, Red Ocean, Blue Ocean, which is a play on the notion of sharks feeding on meat in the water. That a red ocean is full of blood. There are a lot of sharks there, and this is well understood to be a very fertile territory. Whereas a blue ocean is kind of clear and wide open. Nobody's there yet. Nobody's eating anything there yet. And the question of, do you want to be the first person in a brand new market, or do you want to go after a really well-known, valuable, really chased after competitive market? Clinical trials for drugs is one of the reddest oceans you can think of. And you're waiting in there, couple of brand new founders out of MIT, and you're going to make a difference with all these giant pharma companies and people spending all this money doing that. How do you answer the question of whether you've got what it takes?
I think I feel like with clinical trials, it's like a red ocean in terms of that there's like a ton of money in it. I feel like in terms of like the actual like innovations and like AI talent that people are actually doing in it, it's actually like lower than you would expect. I feel like there's a lot of like AI people that are doing like drug discovery, like just incredible like innovations in like drug discovery and like making like like AlphaFold, like all of the protein folding, like all of this stuff like was just incredible. And like at least for us, we're like we feel like there's like actually a lot of innovation to be done like in clinical trials itself. But yeah, so I think like I don't know. I guess for us, it's like we really wanted to focus on like specific areas where it's like not only do they want it to change, but they kind of want it to change now. Like it's like areas where like this really sucks for them. Like this is just like actually ruin some of these like multi-year clinical trials, and like they just really want these things like fixed. So I guess like yeah, I guess for us it was like we really were like trying to focus on like okay, yeah, we have this like this like really big industry that like yeah, like a lot of money, like a lot of people working on it, also kind of like resistant to change, and also like where can we be right now that they're going to want to change like right now. So I guess that was like kind of a big thing for us, is like entry point, I guess.
Yeah, so the fact that this is such a huge market with really well-financed players all devouring each other, it means that they've also become sort of stodgy and they're used to doing things a certain way and they're harder to change. I had a very similar conversation. I don't know if you've all heard of the company Stripe, which is one of the most celebrated startups out there. They're wildly successful. worth hundreds of billions of dollars already, started by an MIT freshman and his brother. And he sat not in this exact chair, but I was interviewing him when he was a freshman. And he said, yeah, I'm going to start a payments processing company because it's too hard to handle credit cards on the internet. And I said, yeah, right. You're going to go up against Visa and MasterCard and PayPal and American Express and every bank in the world. And he said, yep, just watch me. And I actually didn't believe him. And I've been proved wrong. Often some of the biggest and seemingly most obvious problems out there, the industry incumbents, the people who are already in charge. I heard another fun slogan: you can't expect the turkeys to plan the Thanksgiving dinner, which is to say the people who are already invested in doing it a certain way are not the ones who are going to invent some radical new way of doing it. They kind of have too much at stake in doing it the old way. So this can certainly work. And obviously, animal care and veterinary care and all the money that people spend on racehorse care is a very well-traveled market. Did you think about how you're going to be able to make a difference in a potentially crowded field?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to, are you solving a real problem? And so we did our market research. We've interviewed, at this point, 30 plus barns, a bunch of vets. And so we've just seen the consistent trend of the problem. And so that's how we know, yeah, there's competitors in the space, there's different animal solutions, but we have a unique approach to it, and we're solving a burning need that hasn't been fixed yet.
And I think we want to pivot to audience questions now. And for the benefit of our Skype viewers, or Zoom, whatever the heck we're using, I guess Zoom, I've just shown my age there. We'll ask that you come down, and will you hand the microphone to someone who raises their hand? All right, great. And just address whichever team or person you want to answer the question.
I want to ask both teams, if you were to start it over, what would you do differently?
Yeah, if you could start over, what would you do differently? It looks like you're ready to start.
I'd probably say like join a group of like other like student entrepreneurs or just really like motivated entrepreneurs like earlier. Like I feel like after joining like a really cool like student run program like Prod, and like it's both like being around the other people and also just like you can get advice from anyone at any time. Like I feel like it's like I don't know, it just makes the environment different. It's like instead of like I mean, like my friend who's like working on their math piece sets is like super great and all, right? But like I feel like it's also like just really cool to be around like student innovators who also really want to like make their thing happen. And it's just a different energy, I feel like. So I feel like that's what I would say.
I'd say like our standards have gone way up since we've been in this community. We've seen like the amazing things that other students can do, and just like been inspired and stuff. So we've gained like a lot of confidence. Yeah.
So there are kind of two things that come to mind for me. The first thing I would say is don't underestimate the importance of doing your market research extremely well. One of the reasons that Jadel and I ended up spending as much time in the retail space as we did was because we were able to secure a contract, relatively early. And, we saw at least one person was willing to pay for, the service. So we thought, let's definitely kind of put some time in, build this up and continue to do our kind of research in parallel. We maybe did not kind of index as much as we should have on doing that research in parallel, which I think contributed to why it took us as long as it did to realize that, okay, the need we're building for isn't the most salient one in that industry, and that, it is best for us to pivot. The second thing I'll point to is not to underestimate the types of challenges that can come up when building a hardware-enabled service, because we've had to spend much more time than we initially expected dealing with kind of camera-related hardware challenges that have come up in building, both the retail and then also the horse-focused offering.
Yeah, and that's where your mechy roots are important as well. And just the whole notion of shipping something physical in a box or having to go to someone's property and make something work. Many of us software entrepreneurs kind of have no appreciation for what's involved in that. And scaling and maintaining equipment.
I have a follow-up question from the Zoom, which is for Store Guardian. Given that what you just said, how have you done your market research on, oh, can you hear me? How have you done your market research on AI, equine health, given your pivot towards that opportunity?
Yeah, so we looked around in kind of the greater New England area and found a list of, all the public horse barns and veterinary centers, and we just called every single one. And we would just, sometimes when you're doing a cold call, you only have 3 to 5 minutes before people will start getting annoyed, right? So you can only ask a few questions. So just being clear on what's your hypothesis, what do we want to validate, and just start asking every single person. And we started seeing trends just from those small conversations with each person.
The hand back there.
Guys, could you tell me how your typical day look like? How many hours, let's say, per week you spend for the startup, and how it's look like?
Yeah, your typical day and your hours flow. Like, what do you do when you get up? What do you do at noon? What do you do at 5 p.m.? How many hours a day do you work? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so I guess it looked a little bit different in the past during school. We were kind of like working on this in parallel with our classes and stuff. So we'd have to spend some time on classes, but we really just made sure to like set clear goals for ourselves and keep ourselves accountable and meet every week and like just be like talking and thinking about this in the background. And I'd say now, it's hard to put like a set number of hours on this because this is kind of like the primary, I don't want to speak for like Zoe or David, but this is like the primary thing that occupies my brain, I guess, because I feel like this is the way that we can make the most impact with the highest leverage and stuff. And like we can really impact just like millions of people's lives. So like we wake up and like get together and work on this and stuff and we meet. But even when I'm just like walking around, taking a shower or something like that, there's just like thoughts in the back of my brain that are like still going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say when you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work. And that's kind of the level that we've reached now. So I'm getting up at 5 a.m. and reading horse magazines, right? And just trying to understand and just educate myself as a robotics and computer vision guy. What is the space that I'm unfamiliar with? And so that's kind of how I structure my day, kind of reading about, the industry, then looking at the market, and then kind of working on the technical side. Are there some new designs we need to make, things for the algorithm, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, some days, you continue all the way into the night. Other days you take breaks and come back. It's just kind of having a healthy balance of the two.
Yeah, and you're reminding me of so-called tools for thought, which is another area of several entrepreneurs are building mind mapping software, and you've seen innovations like Slack and other things that help you track threads of discussion, how you take a bunch of really complex stuff and keep moving forward every day, how you take notes in meetings, how you share emails with each other. There's a whole mess of problems around. It's just managing your time and collaboration. So did we have another question you were about to go to? Yep.
First, congratulations for your admission to YC. And that's such a good news, like I feel like for entrepreneurs, since we are also like preparing our like application there. I'm just wondering if you have like any experience or any like tips to share.
Yeah, and I might just jump in and do a little bit of translating in case anyone hadn't heard of Y Combinator. A lot of entrepreneurs have heard of this. It's the letter Y dash and the word Combinator. It's a very popular and prestigious kind of startup finishing school, which is largely on the West Coast now. It actually started here and then moved to San Fran. And entrepreneurs apply, and if you get admitted, you spend time there with a bunch of other founders. You get introduced to really cool mentors and prospective investors. And for many startups, it's kind of their propulsion into the fast lane. And you guys are going to go this summer. Huh? You could have gone and dropped out this semester, but you decided to wait till the summer, which I counseled you was a wise decision. And I'm glad you listened to that. It's hard to get people to not drop out when they have a hot startup. And you mentioned being involved in a accelerator program as well. And so the whole process of, and this room to some extent is an accelerator program, the whole process of gathering with other entrepreneurs and being parts of these programs. And I guess the specific question was about Y Combinator and the application process. And if you have any advice about how to apply to Y Combinator or what the admissions process is like.
Yeah, I guess there's just like two parts of it. I guess like the first one is like make a good application, which are like just go through each section, be like just fill it out well. You're like, what's your market opportunity? Like do a good job on the application. I feel like the second part is just like I guess make sure you present your team well, and then make sure that you're like trying to solve a real problem. I guess like not everyone's like application process looks the way that like ours did, but like I think like one of the reasons why I think possibly why we got the interview like really fast, or like why we got in, was because our interviewer she had like taken a medical device like all the way through clinical trials herself. She was like, this is a massive problem basically, and like she was like super excited to talk to us even just in the interview. So yeah, like I think not everybody's like application looks like that. Like I think like sometimes like you can be like a really good team and like still be kind of debating what your problem is, but at least like that's what like our application process looked like.
Yeah, yeah, really great thoughts. Just to add a little bit of context, we actually applied because we heard that most teams that get in have applied like multiple times. So we were thinking, oh, we'll apply now, and then next time maybe we'll get in, right? Yeah, so that's just something to keep in mind when applying. If you get rejected, don't get like down on yourself. Most teams that get in apply multiple times, and also it's not like an indictment of your skills or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, wait, no, it actually threw such a loop in our planning because we were planning to apply twice and then do it in the summer. But then they were like, oh, you get in now. Do you want to go in winter? And they're like, wait, but then we have to drop out. What do we do now? But but they let us defer, so it was fine.
And what's been your experience with startup accelerators? Was it Giselle who said that you had been involved in one?
Yeah, I mean, for my first company, somewhere we applied to a bunch of accelerators, got into a few, ended up doing Alchemist Accelerator. It's a B2B SaaS specific one in San Francisco. So did that. That was pretty cool. And then here for this idea, we've applied to a few. We were in the MIT Pillar AI Collective this past summer. So that's like a new MIT and Pillar VC combined accelerator program.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I know the guys behind Pillar. I've just met with them and was talking about that program. I hadn't realized you guys did that. That's cool. And just to put in a plug for an MIT alum, a guy named Brad Feld started a company called Techstars. And he's no longer running it, but that's largely considered one of the peers and rivals. So Y Combinator, they're very similar, but Techstars has a Boston operation. So for those of you who like New England and the nice cold weather and don't want to be with those weenies in California that sit out in the sun all the time, there is an excellent program here in Boston operated through Techstars. Other questions, comments? Yep.
This is a question for you guys. So from the snapshot that we saw about your first project, the application for retails, potentially the market is like gigantic, right? Because any kind of retail could benefit from this solution. So what was your thought process when you decided to go for the barn business that's a much smaller market? And were you from the get-go thinking, well, we're going to start with this and look at how we could apply what we do for horses, for, companions, pets, or...
Yeah, I mean, the retail market, as you mentioned, is way larger than the individual horse and barn space. But it just goes back to, are you solving a real problem? Because we interviewed over 100 retail stores and everyone pivoted their ideas to now theft instead of product placement. So then when we look into the horse space, it's a smaller market, but we understand the problem and we think we could build a solution here. And then if it works, we can tangentially apply the technology to other areas. So yeah, we are thinking, oh, maybe we could expand this to other animals in the future, but not thinking too deeply about that now. We're just trying to see, can we build this and get the original problem solved?
Yeah, and that's also a variation of that. Would you rather have a small percent of something big or a big percent of something small? Sometimes if you can really be a dominant player and make a huge difference in a small market, that's a good way to get early traction versus being one of 100 people trying to get a tiny piece of a giant market. and you have to figure that out with a go-to-market strategy. When you have a solution to any number of problems and you're not sure who has the problem in a more profound way.
Any more questions from anyone? I have my own personal question, which is I've been sitting on it and I wanted to ask, so I love this opportunity. I'm going to ask a little bit of a personal question about when you guys may have disagreed as co-founders. And you've talked a little bit about the theory of dealing with a disagreement, but I'd love to hear a story about when something wasn't quite agreement, how you guys resolved it and how you took that forward. That'd be really interesting to hear from my perspective.
We'll go with today, this morning, when when I disagreed with my other co-founder about whether we should sign this with this contract for like buying this like compliance thing. And so like we were like debating about it for a while, like I think I was on that like we should get this contract, this compliance thing. Like my co-founder was on that we like or that we should wait and like get more like approval, get like a lawyer to look over it. And like we just talked about it and then we just like resolved it. Yeah. I don't know. Well, yeah, I don't know. I could give more description, I guess. Like, well, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, like why I was thinking that, and like he said why he was thinking that, and then we just like talked about it more. Like we just made sure to like talk about like why each of us were like thinking about each thing, and then we were like, okay, like what we actually gonna do like moving forward, and then we decided.
As a third party observer, I guess I can talk a little bit more about this exchange. Yeah, I think we've shown a lot of growth as a team over the past year. And one of the ways that manifests is the way that we do disagree. So like generally, like there's really not like a lot of feeling in or like, yeah, we try to focus on like the facts. And so Zoe said like exactly why she was thinking what she was thinking and what were the motivations behind that, what were the assumptions. David kind of went through the same thing. And they really just like hashed it out on the spot. So I think it was like a really great example of like a really good resolution.
I'd say for us, one example is the pivot, right? So why did we switch from retail to horses? You know, that took a lot of discussion, and there were definitely some like debates at times of, hey, we have a paying customer. Let's just keep building, let's keep pushing, and let's see where things go. And so there were some disagreements, but I think what we did is that we said, hey, let's take a step back. Let's go back to the facts. Let's review all of our interviews and see what trends and themes we saw in each area and where the market's heading and where's our area of expertise. And then we both were able to come to agreement that we're more technologists, right? Like we would rather build computer vision solutions and apply it anywhere than in one specific domain. And so that's kind of when we came to the conclusion, hey, we should move here. And this is a better opportunity for us.
Hi. My question is, obviously all of you are very smart people and you have like many options, right? Like grad school, job and all that with extrinsic reward, like motivation. But while you're working on startup, obviously that's lacking because every day, how do you kind of give yourself a sense that, am I doing enough? Am I wasting my time? Is it productive to spend my time on this particular problem and do that for many years without a doubt?
I can start. So personally, I've been like interested in theory and doing a startup for a while. I was in the founder's journey on Zoom during COVID, actually. But when it came kind of closer to graduation, I feel like I was looking at the options and it looked like industry and grad school were both like pretty good options, pretty secure and stuff. And so I'd gone through a few internships. And in my last internship, I think it really set in that I couldn't do this for more than 3 months. It was kind of just like really depressing. I didn't feel like I was having much of an impact. Like the benefits and the pay were just outstanding. But at the end of the day, I just like it's not sustainable for me personally. I also had done a year op and my lab was great. I loved all the people there. But I just felt like the work was a little bit too slow paced for me. And then like when Zoe got our team together and like we started working on this, it felt like I could really actually have both agency in what I work on, as well as just like an absolute massive potential for impact.
Oh yeah, yeah. Nabil turned down Google to be with me. It was very sweet. Um, yeah, I guess like for me, like I think okay, low key, like I have less options than Nabil has, right? So like there's one thing, but no, I like let's see, I have chronic pain, which like sucks, and I feel like has me like very frequently thinking about just like medical stuff in general, and like how stuff like kind of sucks, and I like want to improve it. I guess like I've also been interested in startups for a long time, although like I didn't really know like what that would end up being for me. But yeah, I don't know. I'm super happy to like be doing cool stuff.
So I think that, growing up, my parents always told me, do what you love and do what excites you. And for me, I think that was always, entrepreneurship. I always wanted to scratch that entrepreneurial itch. So when I got to MIT, I kind of knew from day one that I wanted to spend at least a significant amount of my time here working on a startup that I was passionate about. And I think right now so I think I briefly mentioned this, I'm in my final year of my PhD. I spend most of my time, I spend my MIT time kind of just writing papers. It's like relatively applied work. So I like being able to, spend a lot of my time complementing that, working on a very real problem, something very tangible and something where, I know that, okay, these machine learning models that I'm developing are going to be deployed like in real time in a barn to monitor the health of these animals. So that's kind of how I think about that.
And maybe I'll ask the last question, unless you were going to jump in, because I know Joe's going to give us a part 2 at 7:30, and people might need to stretch or use the restroom quickly before that. But as a way to entice networking, if someone were to come up and give you their card or scan their LinkedIn profile on your phone, who are you looking for? If you could wish somebody in the room could do X or knows Y, who would you like to meet? What would you like to talk to them about? You guys want to go first?
Does anyone do legal compliance? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, Joe is our legal expert.
Stay
for
for
part
the
2.
next session. The next session is legal in startups.
That's a good ask.
Yeah, I guess yeah, if you're interested in like AI and healthcare, like just like I would love to talk, yeah.
So for us, there's 2 things we're looking for. One is networking engineers, like people that understand video processing, compression, how do you send files through like rural areas to different locations, like, and then also horse experts, like people that are really strong in animals. I mean, we're 2 more engineering side, so like I'm reading the magazines as I mentioned, but it would be great to talk to like experts as well in the space.
All right, great. Well, that's a wrap. Join me in thanking our 4 superb guests.